Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the slide we were viewing. I apologize, we may have got cut off with the voice. So, we looked at the problem with comparing the standards of living based upon prices across countries because some goods may be priced and weighted differently compared to other nations. For example, here we talked about prices of some goods being higher in the US compared to China. On the other hand, there might be prices of other goods which are higher in China compared to the US. So let's look at the present pandemic and the global economic situation because of the COVID-19. How do you think this comparison between US and China's goods and their prices that we have known so far, how do you think our current situation might affect the above scenario? I would strongly recommend and request you to take a look at the different kind of newspaper articles, publications, or even videos of information regarding the changing impact of COVID-19 in terms of socioeconomic well-being across the globe, how it might affect different types of nations with different sources of income. All right, moving along, we will look at although GDP measures many different things, there are some limitations of real GDP. It does not quite take into account certain factors that are somewhat intangible or not really countable. One big item is household production. It is imperative that we all get a good night's sleep, we have food to eat, shelter, clothing, to give us some sense of security. And all of these are usually produced within your household, in your home. We don't often count each of them as part of our economic activity, but with the lack or absence of any one of those items, our productivity would definitely be hampered. The underground economic activity. Especially in a country like Bangladesh, the informal sector has a huge contribution to our economy. Yet, they're most often not counted as part of our GDP. It's difficult to record their kind of income because it is not on a regular basis. Also, there is no particular modus operandi, which makes it very difficult to calculate it. The third is one that you may have been familiar with more in the last 4 months than before, leisure time. Yes, it is very, very important to get some time to rest during your busy day. We've had plenty of that in the past few months. Other than that, when we're very busy with our congestion in the traffic, work time, we often have very little leisure time, and that makes us less productive and less efficient. The fourth, which is the last but not least, among many other factors that do impact our GDP but are not particularly calculated, is environmental quality. Ever since December, when we learned about the coronavirus or the COVID-19, the world has come to a standstill to realize how important our everyday environment and taking care of it is. The change in our environment is probably one of the leading causes of this unhealthy condition. It is imperative that we reorder our requirements of daily life and pay more attention to keeping our environment safe. And our environment being safe would definitely allow us to be more efficient. And we have seen an example of that over the past few months. Let's move on to what we actually like to see in GDP and what piques our interest on an everyday basis. It is not the 435 million or $685 trillion dollars or taka that we think of when we think of GDP. We think of GDP as economic growth. What is economic growth? It's a sustained expansion of production possibilities measured as the increase in real GDP over a given period. In an earlier slide, we did learn how to calculate real GDP. So look at the graph here. This is a very recent graph of Bangladesh's GDP growth rate. Look how in 1970 we were at a negative 18% almost. If you look closer, anything is an improvement from a negative 18%, and a reflection of that is stated where you see a very sharp rise in GDP growth rate. And then again, late 70s, we see another decline. And then there is a gradual kind of up and down fluctuation of GDP until the 1990s, since when there is an incremental growth, consistent growth, and the trend is upward. We see as of 2010 and onward, we've kind of maintained up until 2018 a 7.9% annual change in our growth rate. If you can look closer, we'll see the growth rate in India at 6.8 over the same period of time and Pakistan at 5.8%. This is the figure 7.9% or 8.2% or 6.8% that we are more familiar with when we talk about GDP. So how do we calculate this economic growth rate? What is the economic growth rate we are interested in? Our economic growth rate is calculated, or GDP growth rate for that matter, they're one and synonymous. In terms of real GDP in the current year, less of the real GDP previous year, and divided by that of the previous year multiplied by 100. In other words, economic growth or real GDP growth is the rate at which a nation's GDP changes or grows from one year to another. So for example, in our table earlier, we calculated the real GDP for 2018 and 2017. If we try to replicate the numbers here, we'll end up with something like 47.13%. Yes, it's a bit exorbitant, but remember, this is just a preliminary example to give you an idea and familiarize you with what do we call GDP growth rate. And when we say 7.9% or 6.8 or 5.8%, that is not exactly GDP. It is the growth rate of GDP or the rate of change in GDP. So as we end this chapter, chapter 20, take a moment to review all the slides for the first two chapters, 20 and 21, that we've completed so far. There are a few examples for multiple choice questions. Please feel free to review them. For all 6 sections, we will definitely announce our quiz dates very soon. I hope you will reach out to us by email or through BUX platform on the discussion board if any of the 2 chapter slides that you have reviewed, you have any questions. Hope you have a good day. We look forward to seeing you for the next chapter. Thank you.